Good afternoon, everyone. It's me again. I won't ask you to say good afternoon. Don't worry. We're now having a keynote speaker, a CFTC Commissioner Summer Mercinger, and I will ask her to step up, and away we go. Oh, you might.
Yeah, I might.
Okay.
Let's see if I can. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. Um, well, thank you for the introduction, and it's definitely an honor to be here today, and certainly to be talking about kind of this exciting new technology. Definitely want to say thank you to American University for hosting this event and to the Global Blockchain Business Council for putting this together and allowing me to speak today on this topic. I'm very excited to discuss the regulatory implications of Web3 and blockchain, and I'm kind of interested to hear thoughts of others and perspectives, and looking forward to staying on for our next panel, The New Era of Finance. But before I begin today, I do have to give a disclaimer. It's a standard government disclaimer that the views I express are my own, and they do not reflect the agency, the commission, or my fellow commissioners. So with that, I'm going to put that aside. My staff put together an amazing speech for me, but I'm probably going to go a little more off the cuff today. I've kind of been on the speaking circuit this week, so I found that I'm a little bit more comfortable when I just talk to the audience versus read from my script. So I am going to start with kind of a short history lesson because the CFTC is one of those regulators that people don't always hear about or talk about. Is this better? Okay. Yeah, I'll turn off this. Okay. Sorry about that. So back to the CFTC. It's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and we are we're headed by a 5-person commission. I'm one of those 5 commissioners appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And we have kind of a different regulatory regime than a lot of other financial regulators. So we're a market regulator. And what that means is we are not necessarily looking at every individual who's in the market, every transaction. We're making sure the markets themselves are regulated and that they are regulated in a manner that they are resilient, they're safe, that people's money is protected, and that they serve their function. And the function of so we oversee the derivatives and futures markets. And what that really means is kind of a forward-looking market, secondary market, and the real purpose is for price discovery and hedging and risk mitigation. And we just make sure that those who are kind of enabling those markets to work are doing so properly and making sure that they can serve their function for which they were created. Our predecessor actually started at the Department of Agriculture because this trading first started in agriculture commodities. In fact, it was almost 100 years ago that the predecessor agency was started. So on September 21st will be the 100-year anniversary of the original kind of regulation of these commodities futures markets. And it's really interesting when you go back in history and look at how the markets have changed, how technology has influenced these markets, how technology has helped them become more efficient. So way back when these markets first started and when we first started regulating them, they were in trading pits, and you can imagine they were hot, they were pretty wild, and the way the trading was done was through a process called open outcry, which means somebody was literally yelling and making some gestures. And then when the trade was confirmed, it was written down on a piece of paper. And at first, for a lot of years, it was only men on these trading floors. In fact, it wasn't until 1960 when the first woman trader entered the trading pits. So we had this very kind of old school, in real time, a lot of people involved, a lot of room for, potential errors because you had so many humans involved. That was kind of where we started. It was a little unruly. It was very loud, but that's how these products were. That was the only way you could trade our products. And now we have electronic markets, and those markets really came from, industry coming in and saying, we have a better way of doing this. We have a more efficient way of doing this. And through legislation, through regulation, slowly over about 20 years, we really allowed the electronic markets to develop. And for a long time, they developed and they worked alongside this open outcry system. But now that's completely, there might be a couple of markets where they still do that. I think the pandemic kind of mostly had everyone transitioning fully to the electronic markets, but really widespread adoption of the technology to make these markets electronic. So that's kind of an interesting history, to show how technology really has brought what we do, the markets we regulate, from a really old school way of doing things to a more modern way of doing things. And that has made our job as a regulator much more efficient and easy, and, being able to do our jobs by having the market data in front of us and seeing what's going on day to day. So as a regulator, I like to say we're technology neutral. What that means is it's not so much one technology is better than the other, even when you have extremely innovative and groundbreaking technology. What we want to do is say our rules can apply regardless of the technology underlying it. And the way we do that is through principles-based regulation. And the best way to describe that is this idea that we'll come up with kind of guiding principles of what it should, how things should work. A lot of it's written in our statute, the Commodity Exchange Act, some of it through regulations. But we say to industry, here are the main principles of how your market should work. And then we let industry decide how they're going to do that. We look at what they have proposed to make sure it does satisfy those core principles, but we're not prescriptive. We're not putting down rules and saying you must do your, you must transact your market in these specific ways using this, process. Otherwise, you'll be violating the regulations. We just say, if you can meet these core principles, however you do that, great. And it makes us a pretty nimble and flexible regulator. I think that's why a lot of people, you'll hear a lot of folks talk about the CFTC taking an important role in regulating crypto markets. It's why we see Congress kind of starting to focus on this, on the CFTC becoming a regulator of crypto cash markets. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're a bit more nimble. We have these principles-based regulations, and we can generally be more flexible depending on the technology. Normally, regulators are pretty skeptical of new technology, but because of our history at the CFTC, I think we take a very different view. We see technology as an opportunity to not only improve our markets and the way they function, but make our lives easier as a regulator. And at the end of the day, technology really has made our markets safer and more efficient. So it makes us a different regulator than I think some of the other financial regulators you'll hear about. And we think, we think that's what makes us well prepared to handle some of the new emerging technologies that are beginning to be used in the futures market, and certainly in the cryptocurrency markets. So what's interesting about our jurisdiction, though, is because we're a market regulator, we look at futures products. We don't necessarily regulate the product. So I try to use the example of, I feel like the agriculture markets are the best example of this. So we regulate the cattle futures market. So the people who are hedging the price of buying and selling cattle and beef, they are in the market buying and selling contracts, and we oversee that market. But as far as selling a cow at a sale barn, that's not us. And we are happy to let somebody else handle that. So that's the Department of Agriculture. So that's kind of how we look at every market. So right now, if you look at digital assets, there are a lot of futures products on these assets, and we regulate those markets. But the assets themselves, the buying and selling of those assets, that's not what we don't regulate that. We do have some enforcement authority, but for every day regulating the exchanges, doing examinations, working directly with those who are providing the markets to buy and sell cryptocurrencies, we're not regulating that space. And so that's a lot of what you see in legislation and some of the proposals is expanding our jurisdictions so we can start to regulate that space where you're actually buying and selling the asset, not a derivative of the asset. And I think, the jurisdictional issue is complicated, but I think understanding, that we don't necessarily regulate the buying and selling of the product exactly, but we're regulating the market that does that. Looking at it that way kind of gives you a good view into why we have the right expertise to regulate these markets and to really take this information and make sure that we're providing safe and secure places for people to transact. So, for example, our enforcement team, their entire experience is identifying fraud and manipulation in the markets, looking at a lot of market data, seeing what's happening, determining what is the consequence of a bad behavior versus market fundamental, reaction. So they know how to look at this data and interpret what's happening and ensure that there are not bad actors manipulating the market. And it's a unique function of the CFTC. So I really think that's why people have focused on our agency as a potential regulator. I don't know what will happen with the legislation. I'm not quite sure what form, but we hope to have the opportunity to apply our expertise to this area. And getting back to Web3 and blockchain, again, because we are more technology neutral and we don't have to focus specifically on how everything is processed, it really does allow for this innovation. It allows for new ideas to come on the market. And it also allows the market to come in and really meet with the regulator, talk to the regulator, explain what they're trying to do, and work hand in hand to come up with a system that that works. And I think that's also unique to our agency. You know, we're seeing new ideas come into the markets, and we're seeing it's people having kind of new ways of doing some of the, whether it's the settlement of the market or the way the trading day occurs. And we really are just able to take what we have, our principles, our core principles, and say, okay, how does this meet these core principles? So it's unique, and I think there's real potential for entrepreneurs and those who are looking to bring new technology solutions into the market. We hope to provide clear rules of the road for those who are looking at new ways of being involved in our markets using new technology. We want to make sure that our regulations or our principles are clear and comprehensive and flexible. And we want to make sure that regulation is also not simply checking the box. And I think that's something that probably plays in well when you're dealing with kind of new technology. We're not tied to any specific format or procedures or business models, and we really are just looking at how to deliver a product to the consumers and market participants in a safe and efficient way. So that's kind of the overview of the CFTC and what we're able to bring to the regulation of these new markets. It's not easy. We certainly are always in learning mode. We tend to, we're not the experts here, so we tend to try to meet with stakeholders and industry to fully understand the technology and what they're doing. It helps us do our job better, so I always encourage people to come in and talk to us. It's really the only way we can do our jobs and how we can learn as regulators, and make sure that what actions we do take do not harm innovation, do not stop innovation in its tracks, but really lay the groundwork for it to flourish and evolve in a responsible way. So as an agency that started out in agricultural products and trading in agricultural futures, to now looking at digital assets and a lot of other really interesting financial products, we really do understand the importance of allowing new technology to flourish and be a part of the system, and finding ways to make sure that we are being promoters of innovation and not stopping it in its tracks. And I'm confident that we'll continue to work in that manner moving forward. So I'm looking forward to the panel. I think if anyone has any questions, feel free to come up and talk to me. Again, I welcome everyone to come by my office and chat. Like I said, we learn best from folks who are in the industry. There's only so much we can do within our, within what we can read. So meeting with people directly is the best way for us to learn about our job. And, we just are always looking forward to kind of what's going to be our next, moving from open outcry to electronics market, what's going to be the next transformation in our space. So thank you to the Global Blockchain Business Council and American University for hosting this event today. I'm looking forward to seeing what new opportunities Web3 will create for everyone. And I'm just honored to share my voice as a regulator in this important discussion today. Thank you.